Okay, you alive. All right. Something I didn't do right, Sister Diamond. But that's why I don't go solo yet. Go ahead. We were talking about UNIA and the way you see things, and things have really not changed that much. And we're going to talk about ways that we need to go, the things that we need to be talking about as a people, things we need to be doing as a people, um, and the time that it is now in terms of how do we move, how do we face the oppression. Same, nothing has changed. So I was asking you, tell us a little bit about your history and how you got involved with UNIA and so forth. Tell us a little bit about you. Let's get to know you a little better.
Yeah, so I'm Dr. Evandra Catherine today. That's who I am today. But long before I became her, I had a very traumatic childhood, as many of us do, due to generational slavery, generational poverty, generational everything. So it fell on me and my generation. And so after having lived such a traumatic life, I was homeless for a while. Education, as you know, it is what it is. You don't really know who you are, and when you feel like you've gone through so much trauma, you start asking the creator, why me? All the time. Why me? Why me? Why me? And
Mm-hmm.
so when I got out of I went to the Air Force to escape homelessness. And so while I'm in the Air Force, I was stationed at the Pentagon, and it was a very unique assignment where I was the only enlisted member amongst a bunch of officers. And so I had that experience, and then throughout that experience, like all these things would come up about race, but I didn't really understand it. I couldn't center myself in what people were saying to me. And at that time, I was 18 years old, so I didn't have anything to center myself into. And I come out of a generation where nothing had happened for a long time, um, and there was no social media or internet, and so all I knew of was like the Rodney King police brutality. And then the AIDS epidemic, the crack epidemic, and then like 9/11. So that's my generation without any internet or phones or anything. I got my first cell phone in my 20s. So I grew up totally out of the internet world. So I went to university to major in African American studies. I wanted to be a civil rights lawyer or a politician. It was all I knew. But what I did know, to do either of those jobs, your undergraduate degree just didn't matter. And so I felt like, well, why not go learn about who I am? And so I majored in African American studies. Um, Throughout that process, it was a spiritual awakening for sure. I had never doubted myself so much in life before I got to the African American Studies department. And then I found out that I had a whole entire existence. My essence was more than every experience that I had ever had. And there was so much that had happened before me, that it was so much to grasp. And so I wanted immediately to just go to work. Like, what do I need to do to make the ancestors proud? And interestingly, the shirt I have on, it says the ancestors are proud, because I'm always looking for a way to make the ancestors proud. And so to your point about the oppressions and the experiences over time and generations, my very first protest was in 2006 with the genocides out of Louisiana. And at this time, I didn't know what it really truly meant to be Black, but I knew that I had experienced a lot of racism and discrimination, but couldn't contextualize it. And so when Gina 6 happened, there were like, everybody was like, hop on a bus. We're all going to Louisiana. But there was this sense of a spirit that came with it, as if it was the norm, and that I should have known that that was going to happen next. And so I didn't know that that was supposed to happen next. And I couldn't understand why so many Black people were trying to hop on a bus and go to Louisiana. Like, what was that about? And then people were like, let's black out and protest. And so that is when I first found out, not found out, that was when I first could contextualize something like lynching. So up until this point, hadn't experienced it. I learned about it as an AFAM student, but I had no context. It was knowledge. And then Gen 6 happened. And then that was where I was like, oh, This is what lynching is. This is why this symbol of a rope hanging in a tree is so powerful, and why it caused these young Black men to become part of a system that's just going to further dehumanize them beyond the rope that was hung up in that tree. And so it was at that moment when I decided that, wow, like this is something that must really truly be in the fabric of being Black in America, and that this is what we have to do to bring awareness to the atrocities against us, although they are very well known by those that are committing them. And so that's sort of like who I am, and that's where I started. And right shortly after Jenna 6, this young, vibrant Black man out of Illinois comes out and wants to run for president of the United States. And so that was exciting at the same time. And so I learned how to bring awareness to an issue, the impacts of an issue on Black people from history and the trauma through Jenna 6. And then there was a sense of hopefulness just 2 years later in 2008 with President Obama's campaign. And so through his campaign, I learned what organizing was. I knew what getting out a vote was. I know what it meant for you to not have the opportunity or access to vote. And so those things began to happen. And so I started my master's program in 2009 in public administration, because that's when I knew through the Jenna 6 experience, my AFAM experience, that it was the policy route that I wanted to go, not civil rights lawyer. I wanted to be able to change things on paper. And then that's where it got me sort of here today. I've been organizing since that time. I've had all types of experiences. I ran for state office for the House of Delegates in Virginia in 2013 in a Democratic primary against a 30-year incumbent. I lost by 270 votes, which was nearly none. And I won the popular vote in the city. Mm-hmm. And so my that's been my history. I've had to experience what my ancestors experienced and then find new ways to sort of solve those problems. And today, I would say that I've learned, to your point, that if you keep doing the same thing and expecting different results, it's sort of like insanity. And we wonder why we're still doing the same things and the strategies and tactics are still working against us. And it's because we're still sort of using these integrationist theories and philosophies and organizations to exist. And these organizations, like the UNIA ACL, is an organization about redemption and liberation and sufficiency and sovereignty. And most organizations function in the US context, function from an ask and an advocacy position of asking to include us. And the problem is that a system built for whites and by white can never include us in it. We need our own system. And we are so powerful globally that should be a system across the diaspora that's universal for all Black people. And so that is why I am now working very closely with the Universal Negro Improvement Association, as we're in our centennial year, to reposition where this organization was in history and elevate its position in history today.
Now, as far as young people concerned, do you think most young people today have a deeper experience with understanding who they are and their history, or do you feel they're in the same position that you was before you became aware?
And I feel they're in the same position. They're uneducated. They've been educated by the colonizer, and every generation after us will continue to feel less and less connected to their Blackness if we don't take back our sense of cultural heritage and education to re-educate our youth. So the generation of now, they experience what I've experienced in you, but since they have social media, I think it's worse because they have to see it. And it's traumatizing, and it plays over and over and over again. And the story gets mixed up so many times that by the time it gets to me or you, it's one story. But yet these people whose lives are being exploited through media, they have families. So that's traumatic to their families. So this generation not only are less educated, in a lot of areas they have more education, but it's more technology related, not culturally related, economic and politically and socially. And so to answer your question short, I would say they are very much so still just as educated or maybe a little less educated than I am. But I do know that there are families that are doing a lot better of educating in the home. And so when I think of it in that sense, it's perhaps a lot more education that is taking place in the home. And if we could continue that, maybe we could see a shift in our education and what we need to do for our own liberation.
You know, Dr. Clark said that we will either uh, Africanize or perish. What is your view on that? We will either become Africanized or we will perish. Do you see it that way? I mean, you're out there with young people, and I was talking the other day with Brother Durrell. My neighbors celebrated the 4th of July, and their music was very loud, and every other word was nigger this and nigger that, and bitch this and bitch that, and so forth. And I spoke with another brother, I called him, and asked him uh, what he felt about that. And he said that I was just out of touch with the young people, and the young people were giving me and giving us, and they were living in the temperature of today. This is their temperature. And what I needed to do was to be more in contact and in touch with these young brothers and sisters um, who that is their world, and they're expressing their world. And he said, if you cut on TV, what you will see is practically pornography in every movie. So they are not any less, expressive of the time. That is the time. That's what they see, and that's what's around them. And so you have to somehow be more in touch with their world, which I disagree with. I mean, from the standpoint of we need to start where we are in terms of dialogue. But you mentioned that we have to have the elders involved, and I don't know if we had this conversation I know we had the conversation, but I don't know whether we were recording it at the time. And I expressed that I agree with you because the young people have not, you know, there's so much that they have not experienced. And it's like crossing the desert. Um, and I asked my grandson if he were going to cross the desert, who would he rather go with? The old lions or the young lions? And he said to me, Grandpa, I'm going to go with the young lions. And I said, why? He said, well, they're faster, they're stronger, and I prefer to be with them than to be with the old lions who are slower and less combative. And I said to him, but you would die in the desert because you've never been across the desert. You don't know where the water holes are. You don't know where the enemies are. You don't know the way. And you can't get across the desert without either going with someone who has experienced it or without knowing where your enemy is or where the water holes are. So then I asked him again, and he said, well, all right, Grandpa, I prefer to go with you. So I want to ask you in regard to the young people, how do we bridge this gap? Because unless we can bridge this gap, we can't make it through this desert. And we are certainly in the desert. And at the end of this desert, unless we can find the water holes, we will perish as a people. And that's for real. We don't know what time it is. We don't know ourselves. Um, if we just know ourselves and what our history is, it will arm us to get across the desert. But how do you interface that with the cultural, um, I won't say hip hop, but this very negative display of disrespect for our women, ourselves, and this expression of self-hatred where we kill each other for even just looking at one another. Uh, what is your insight on how do we approach this?
Yeah, no, you asked a lot, and it's easy to sort of look at it and explain it from beginning to end. I mean, I think you and I would agree if we wanted to give a short answer that it's the system that we're in that allows it to happen, right? And so, what does that mean? It means that this is my opinion, but I believe it to be true. When America, not America, when the colonizers started to attack the black male, that is when the family unit just fell apart. And so what you have are no black men within the community to start. And then because of that, it forces women to take on a lot of roles and responsibilities that the male would take on in a situation. And so what you have found is what's left in the community are the elders and the youth is what's left. And there aren't the parents there in the middle to bridge the elders and the youth together in normal and organic conversations and relationships. Because there was a time when on Sundays that every generation of a family was sitting around a table eating. And so the young people were building relationships with the old, and the old were building relationships with the young. And so what the old didn't seem so foreign to the young, and vice versa. So it was in those moments that we don't have today that it didn't appear that what grandpa was telling me was so far off, because every Sunday since I came out of the womb, grandpa has been saying these same things over and over again. And life experiences has shown me that what grandpa is saying is true. So to answer your question about it, there are no one in the village tending to the elders and the youth right now. The men are not even in the community, and those that are facing a level of oppression that I think is that no one else really could truly face, because the oppression that they experience comes from the fact that they can annihilate the white race with sperm. And so because of that, the oppression against them is very real. And so our youth today don't have any guidance except the media. And what you said is the times. The media is telling these young kids what to do, how to think, how to act, what to listen to, how to treat a woman, how to treat a man, how to even identify yourself within your own gender and species. And so what we have to do because of it is acknowledge it. And then we do have to meet these youth where they are first, because regardless of the issue, trust between people is how you build relationships. And if we can't enter in their space and meet them where they are, we can't even ask them to respect us or trust us. And so that goes in the opposite direction as well, is the youth have to be willing to come back in and listen to the elders. But this generation in mine, we didn't see many great examples of elders telling us things that were right. And so what happened for me, for example, and may happen to others, my elders were in the church. And so the elders in the church are a different type of elder. And so they sort of put into you all of these things that you cannot do based on the Bible versus telling you the things you can do. And so what you end up experiencing is a bunch of elders trying to force you into something that you don't fully understand and never really telling you what you can do to be a better human, a better person. And so what I found is that my negative experience with the church ultimately led to me growing up not wanting to listen to the elders, because I felt like they was trying to put me into some box because I didn't choose to walk or follow the rituals or the whatever of that particular religion. And so for many young Black children, they are in a church at some point in time in their life because a grandma or an auntie or somebody is going to take them. And so I would say that we as young people have to see elders that can give us compassionate love without forcing it on us through a religion or a book, because we're not going to trust you if you keep telling me what I can't do and how much of a sinner I am and how often I'm going to go to hell. That's not going to work. And then the youth in return have to be able to find a way to trust. And so to answer your question, we have to meet each other in the middle, because there is no village to bridge the gap like it would happen around the table at Sunday dinner. And honestly, before the youth come and meet us in your space, rather, we got to come and meet them in their space or my space. And that's just really hard to do when you don't have someone bridging that gap in the middle, like a mother or an aunt or a cousin or a father or a brother. And so that's how I would answer that. And I wanted to touch on your first part when you talked about Africanizing. That's something very deep. And that comes down really literally to something as basic as language, right? We have chosen to just get rid of our language, our form of communication as Black people. And when we started to do that, we started to become more white, more European. We started to speak the language of the oppressor, and we started to understand their systems and their indoctrination more, because that was the only language we knew. And so that part right there, we need to take back our language first and our forms of communication, fellowship and convening and congregating, and re-Africanize ourselves. Get back to the rituals and the principles, the virtues, the African traditions and spiritualities we got our ancestors to get us to here today. And so I sort of answered two things at one time.
Very good, very good. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. The thing of it is how to set up these institutions, which we can educate ourselves. And we got lots of social media. You got Facebook, you got live screen, you got, yard stream, all these things that we can talk to each other and set up classes. And even in the classes of science, health, we have professionals who can teach it from an African perspective and give us a much deeper understanding of both our health and how to maintain it, and how to use nature, the herbs, and how to grow food. We have all that we need, but we need a way of bringing it to one another. And so that was really my primary reason for wanting to have this conversation with you. Because I thought maybe we could create some models or talk about some models that can be used on a daily basis, because we're going to have to do that for ourselves. Nobody's going to do this for us. Nobody's going to educate us. Nobody's going to save us. In fact, they're trying to kill us, exterminate us. So unless we come, and then anything you're coming up with, every conversation is recorded. We're on, but the whole world is looking at us. I hope so. I think that's, we have to use whatever is in our hands. As Adam Clayton Powell said, use what's in your hand. What's in your hand? What's in our hands? I'm asking you the question. What's in our hands that we can begin to use to educate each other? After emancipation, we as a people, and this was written in congressional records, they said that we as a people had made more progress in the 15 years of Reconstruction than any people in history, in human history. We each one taught one, each one reached out, and so forth. I came out of that kind of community where my aunts were school teachers. We built our own churches and our own schools, and we were committed to helping one another. The one thing that we just had was love for one another. And I think that was basically because there weren't any white people in our community. I'm from South Carolina. We were back in those woods It was just us.
Mm-hmm.
We hardly ever saw white folks, so we didn't know them,
Mm-hmm.
but we knew we weren't free either. We knew that we had a place in the scheme of things, and white folk controlled the political uh, relationships, they controlled the economic relationships, they controlled the police and the Ku Klux Klan. So we had to live among ourselves, knowing that we were all we had, and we had to teach one another. So we grew up with love. Now, love, that kind of love and family unity. And let me say, we continue that to this day. We have family reunion, two, three, sometimes 400 of us come together every year, and we spend like 4 or 5 days together. We go. We don't just go back to the farm where all this began, but we've been to Africa. We've had family reunion in Africa. Uh, I thought I was going to carry 200 because 200 signed up, but then the Hutu Tutsi war broke out, and all them people who was going to go said they weren't going to Africa, and people were killing each other. And it was hard to convince them that Africa is a huge place. And even though there's a war in one area, Africa is 3 times the size of America. And when we go in, there ain't no war. People are waiting on us to show up. Even the President Rawlings sent his team out to meet us and participate in our family union. It was a big thing. So how do we, how do we bring this together and begin to express and teach this love of one another? Because if we don't live my art, first with ourselves and then with one another, which is an African principle, which stands for truth and justice and harmony and balance and righteousness. We have to live that among ourselves and then with one another. And that becomes the guiding principles that can help us across the desert. So, how do we set up these role models? And even if they're, well, we have role models, Marcus Garvey, which you very well understand and participate in. Uh, but those role models, our young people are not being exposed to. They don't have that history. They don't read. And, you're not seeing uh, you're not seeing programs, TV programs, and so forth about them. You don't have the Tyler Perrys and the Oprah Winfrey's uh, uh, dealing with producing episodes which deal with our history and the greatness of our people. They're into if loving you is wrong and all of these other scandalous programs. They keep your attention. They stimulate you sexually and all of the other uh, near pornography episodes that they have. Uh, but you see very little of the people who have the resources and the outlets dealing with the survival of African people. How do we begin to relate in a way that we can meet each other and teach each other?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think as you alluded to the fact that the blueprint would be a model like the Universal Negro Improvement Association. That's a really, really great blueprint. I think that part of the reason why many of us in my generation look to the media for things, but then don't look to that same thing for knowledge because in those same hands are the internet, it's just because we don't know what is true anymore. I think there was a good job of putting out there that we have learned a white man's education, and so they've never taught us anything about ourselves. And so now, so many of us younger people don't really know what is true. So when you read, you still don't know if what you read is true. And everyone will lead you to believe that there is some sort of conspiracy theory. And then another point is that young people ask me this question all the time. If we have the internet and Marcus Garvey didn't have it, how come we can't do what Marcus Garvey did? And the answer is in the question itself. Marcus Garvey didn't have the internet. That's why Marcus Garvey was successful. The internet, you see, as you mentioned, everything you do, someone is listening. If you put out any plan, someone is going to hear it. If you tell anybody to meet up, you post it online. So like everything is co-opted. There's an Agent 800 at every single thing that we are doing as Black people. What the UNIA gave us hope for would be that we would be Africans for Africa. We as African peoples across the diaspora, we would control our own media. So we wouldn't have to worry about people like Tyler Perry and Oprah Winfrey, who are very nearly close to being Black capitalists, to take their platform and produce knowledge that would make us rise up against the same system that's paying their bills. We can't do that or expect them to do that. But what the UNIA said was, we're going to control everything about us and by us. So if we had our own media, we could put the history out there without some organization either cutting it, chopping it up, editing it, or giving it to us from a different perspective. We need to be able to convene together the way that you did on the farm without anybody knowing. I don't know why people now can't understand how to do that, but yet the enslaved Africans were able to find ways to meet up and convene together and know the master didn't know. I don't understand how that was possible, but today we still can't do it. And the reason I can't understand it is because there was no internet then. So then it forces me to understand what's happening. We are being co-opted. Many people do not know, but the very first FBI agent that was Black was hired to co-opt Marcus Garvey, because everyone knew that what Marcus Garvey was doing was going to make a unified Africa, a unified diaspora. So what we need to do to reach out to us, you mentioned people when you first started talking that can help us with, and particularly in medicine, holistic medicine, like the Dr. Sebis, etc. The reason why we can't expect those in America to do it so well, because individuals that have that level of knowledge and skill and expertise are bought by the system, and they cannot find themselves with a red, black, and green banner behind their head on some show in front of a bunch of Black children educating them, because then that would make them look some type of way, and then they can therefore lose out on their next meal. And so you have a lot of Black people in America now that participate in capitalism and like capitalism and fear that if they did something to jeopardize that, they would miss their next meal. So what we need to do first is we need to develop a unified Africa. We need to redeem Africa and liberate Africa, so that a person with the skills and expertise who feel like they may lose their job for providing knowledge to uplift people, they have a place that they can go and still get paid and make a livelihood. In that instance, the Constitution and bylaws for the Universal Negro Improvement Association, one of the positions is a Surgeon General for a reason, because we should be teaching and telling each other about help from our perspective. In addition to the Surgeon General, we had the Black Star-Crossed nurses. We had our own medical doctors. We had our own medical program. And then we also had our own education and etc. Marcus Garvey had a steamship. He had a factory company. He was looking forward to us all being able to do exactly what you said without fear and repercussions of losing a dollar out of this system of capitalism. So the way that we have to do it, unfortunately, is that we're going to have to elevate the UNIA. We're going to have to do live out the model that was left behind in the blueprint that was left behind us. We need to find the skills and the talents that we can here in the U.S. and send those skills and talents to the continent to help redeem the continent, so that the continent can help produce for her children across the diaspora where she is, where they are. Because not everyone wants to go back to Africa, and that's fine. But wherever you are, your Black body needs to be saved. And so what we're doing here in this centennial year of the first international convention of the UNIA is looking back at the Declaration of Rights of Negro Peoples. that was wrote 100 years ago and that is very relevant still today. That document preceded the League of Nations, which preceded the United Nations. And that document should have went into the League and it should have went to the United Nations. In fact, Marcus Garvey sat on the floor of the League of Nations. And so we have a blueprint. We have to just re-elevate that blueprint. And we need to show other Black people who feel as though they can't afford to buck the system of capitalism that they do have somewhere to go. You could stay here and be safe, or you can go to the continent and be safe. But we cannot do that until the rest of the global world looks to Africa for not to exploit her because they want what we have and they can't get it. And that is where we need to go to resolve the problem. Right now, so many of us feel so hopeless and there's so much apathy that picking up a book to read for a solution, no one wants to do it. But the solution is the UNIA. It is. And once we get it back to a place where our membership body is young and vibrant, because there is no way that an organization can last 100 more years if the largest part of that organization isn't the younger generation being mentored. And within the UNIA, we put all of our members through the African Philosophy School. And that way they can get educated on who they are. Knowledge of self is first. If you don't have knowledge of self, you can't see your way out. No model makes sense because you cannot connect you to the lady in the village in Africa with a bucket of water on her head who just walked 10 minutes away. You can't connect yourself to the Black Africans in Brazil or Central America. So it's hard to look for a solution when you cannot connect yourself to the rest of the world globally. And as people of color, we are the world. And as Black people, we are probably the whole world in my perspective. And so to really answer your question, we got to get back to a point where we are not afraid of redeeming Mother Africa. We are not afraid of redeeming Blackness. We are not afraid of re-Africanizing ourselves. We are not afraid of the language that we use, our wide noses and big lips, our wide hips and our big hair and our soul food and all of the other things out there that we are known for as culturally. But we need to turn those things into things that are healthy. We need to make sure we're healing ourselves with our own medicine. We're educating our kids with our own education. We have economic development and initiatives that connects the continent to the Caribbean, to Central America, to South America, and North America, and all the way back around. We have to have those international economic trade relationships and agreements. We should be knowing what's coming in and out of the Panama Canal, what's going around the Cape of Africa. We should be controlling all of those resources, and we should not be sending our resources to another country so that me in America, I got to buy it from that country. I want to buy directly from Africa. And so the blueprint is there. We just have to make sure that people are aware of the history and the legacy of the UNIA and what Marcus Garvey was seeking to do. And some would say that it's not a model that will work in the 20th century. Every organization has to evolve with the times. So it has to just evolve with the times. But that doesn't mean its vision, its mission, its essence, and its legacy will change. Just that some of the things that we do, the practices and strategies to get to liberation and redemption just look different. But the blueprint and the model of what it means to be socially, economically, and culturally sovereign, we need to get there. And that's where I want to see us go. And that's what I'm fighting for every day.
You know, when we begin to understand and actually see who we are as a people, it empowers you. It gives you a consciousness that makes you strong and able to go down into the deep wells of our history and draw from that history. For an example, there's a big thing about taking down the statues of these Confederate overseers. A big one is Robert E. Lee. They have a big thing about the Southern general who committed treason against this country and who is responsible for more than 60,000 Americans being killed. But in removing the statue, nobody ever makes mention that there were 130,000 African Americans or black troops involved in the Civil War, and they made the difference, and they literally won the war, saved America, and liberated themselves. If they knew that the 25th uh, Corps uh, captured captured Richmond, Virginia, which was the headquarters of Robert E. Lee, ran his ass out of there and recaptured him at Appomattox and held him for General Ulysses Grant to come down uh, and arrest him. But Grant didn't arrest Robert E. Lee and hang his ass for committing treason, which is what he should have did. He let Robert E. Lee go, the man who had committed treason against this country and was responsible for thousands and thousands of deaths, both black and white. Uh, but the heroes in the Civil War really was African people, both slaves and free men. Uh, and that's never talked about. So the image that is presented of black folk is one that somebody's given us something. They went to war to free us. Damn, we freed ourselves and we saved this country. Other than that, there would be a Confederate flag flying over Richmond, and we'd still all be under some form of, well, not all, but I mean, we would still be under that chattel slavery system, and America would not have any uh, democratic. Uh, it ain't got much now, but it wouldn't even have what it's got if it don't be for black soldiers, for blacks who died for this country. We didn't only build it physically, we built it intellectually. I mean, Washington D.C. is laid out um, from Egypt on the Potomac. Nobody does a better job than Tony Browder when he gives that tour and shows you where Benjamin Banneker laid out Washington, D.C. I mean, people treat you as they perceive you to be. And if they perceive you to be, ignorant and criminal and so forth, they treat you that way. But if they perceive you to be the intellectual giants, which we are, practically everything that was really invented in this country was invented by black folk. So that history, we need to teach it when we really see who we are and what our ancestors have left for us. We're living in a time of Kephas, which is the Ethiopian king, the rise of the black man. When I was at the Million Man March, and I came home that evening to hear the summary of the Million Man March, Tom Brokaw gave his spiel of it, and then at the end he says, "Oh, by the way, there was a new star found in the heavens tonight. I wonder if it has anything to do with the Million Man March." So when I heard him say that, I said, "Wow, that's interesting." So I called Dr. Charles Finch down at Morehouse College of Medicine because I knew he was an astrologist and a brother. And he said, "Oh, yeah." He said, "That was Kephas. Kephas is the Ethiopian star, which stands for the rise of the black man." So when the North Star, when Kephas takes the place, becomes the North Star, the brightest star in the heavens, there's new energy that will be coming into the earth that will uh, that will uh, be that we can tap on, and it's just like our ancestors not only gave us the 12-year calendar, I mean, yeah, the 12-month calendar, which is seasonal, but they gave us a 26,000-year calendar, and that's the zodiac. But at this particular time, our ancestors laid out that this would be our time. So we need to know that we are living in a time where the energy is pulling us, just like in the wintertime, trees look dead. I mean, but that's because they are not getting the rays of the sun, and the sap has went down to the roots. But in the spring, that sap rises, and it has nothing to do with man. Man ain't got nothing to do with that. That's the universe. That's creation. Brings that sap up, and those branches will get limbo. They have leaves on them, and they'll blossom, and they'll come to life. This is our season, and it's the cycle in which Black people will again uh, take their rightful places in the world. So just knowing that gives you a confidence and an energy to work from and to work with, that if you didn't know it, you wouldn't be able to draw on it. It's like having a huge bank account that you don't know you got, and so you can't access it because you don't know it's there. So I agree with you. This is our time to work very closely with Africa, because everything this system needs and the European system needs is in Africa. They want everything in Africa except the people. So a lot of the education of that Africans uh, have is the same Christianity and the same education that we have, where white is superior, and we're in the same condition. But African Americans bring something to the table for the brothers and sisters in Africa that we need to work together. And we can build a world that we imagine and that we want to bring into being. So we have to get our young people to begin to draw models of a world in which they want to see. And the Creator will give them the necessary tools to bring that world about. But they must work on it. They must actually, as you say, begin to plan and work together to develop that world and to bring it into being. Uh, and as long as we live the principles of my art, we will be able to bring that world into being, because when you live truth and harmony and balance with yourself and with your people, it's not you who speaks, it's the Creator who's speaking through you.
Mhm.
And so, this European can't beat the Creator, even though he's trying.
Tried.
So because he can't beat the Creator, he thinks that if he beat us, who are the children of the Creator, who are one with the Creator,
Mhm.
then he's beating the Creator.
Mhm.
But that's only because we don't know this. But once you know this, there's a protection power. Once we live it, there's all kinds of magical, and magic is only because you don't know how it's done. But there are all kinds of magical resources that we will access to bring about the world that we can that we dream of, which will be a world of harmony and balance and truth. If we live it, we will manifest it among ourselves. So, I yeah, that's my elders' uh,
True.
truth of how to cross the desert, and I am just so pleased to know you and to hear you, uh, and I send all the power that I have uh, as an elder to you and for your work. And my prayer is that other young people will listen at you and will be impressed and impacted and come together with you because we have to return to Africa. Not again, not that all of us are going there. We're not. Some of us just like I gave family union there, and 200 people signed up, and only a little less than 50 went. But the 50 that went came back, and they were so amazed, and they had such a good time that everybody else then wanted to go. But they didn't want to be the pioneers to go on the first family union in Africa. But if I gave it again now, because it's been talked about so much and we filmed it and they saw what a great time we had, they want to go now. But I haven't been able to get back there with them. But this is where we are as a people. We are great. We just don't know our greatness, and but we can access it through love. So I don't know. However you want to communicate uh, the rest of this program, I thought we would look for an hour. Let me see what time it is. Yeah, we got another 10 minutes, so they are yours. Please talk to us.
And I think for me right now, the time is now. And you can feel the energy. And when you were telling your story, I went back and I thought about the African burial ground in Richmond, Virginia, which you probably are familiar with. Are you familiar with the African burial ground?
I've heard about it. I'm
Okay,
not
so
that familiar with it.
I started my activism and everything in Richmond, Virginia, the capital of the Confederacy, and the starting place of a lot of our ancestors. And so I lived that truth for 15 years. The African burial ground sits downhill from the medical hospital that's ran today by Virginia Commonwealth University, VCU. And everybody remembers VCU from being in the news for basketball. So the reason I put that geographically in that context is that what happened was VCU's hospital at night or whatever time of the day would go downhill and rob the graves that the Africans were buried at, and then take their bodies back to the hospital and do whatever experiments and tests that they wanted to do. And then they threw all of their bodies in a well that was on the hospital site. And so in 1990s, this particular site where this well was dug up to build a new building. And when they dug it up, the archaeologists found a ton of human remains. And so after they found the human remains, they were taken to the Smithsonian. Yeah, they were taken to the Smithsonian in DC, and they were able to do the tests that were necessary to determine who these bones belonged to. And they determined that these bones belonged to enslaved Africans at the period right after the African troops defeated Robert E. Lee. And so these bones were dated back sometime between late 1800s, early 1900s. The reason I tell this story, and if you want to look this story up online, it's called the East Marshall Street Well Project, and that's where you can get all the details. But when you talked about us being in Keithis right now, at the end of 2019, the remains of our ancestors who had been housed at the Smithsonian since the 1990s were brought back home to rest. They were brought back home to rest. It was like November, December, something like that of 2019. And at that moment, I said to myself, there is going to be a shift in the universe when those bones make it back to the earth. And the activism in Richmond right now is just, I lived there for 15 years, and there's been a lot of activism in Richmond, Virginia. And what's happened right now is quite impressive, to say the least. And so what I want to leave this with is that we as Black people are universal people. We are one with the universe. We are one with nature, and we have to understand that and find our roots back into Africa. That is where our roots are. That is where our knowledge of self is. And it doesn't mean literally and physically you need to go back there to get that knowledge, but you need to get the knowledge from the continent and get the resources from there. And so what I want to leave this program with is simply just asking my generation and the generation after me to trust somebody. I want to be that person you can trust, to be honest, because I know what it's like not to trust. And so I know how to show trust. I know how to show loyalty. I'm a person of integrity. You got to find people that live those truths and hope that they tell you the right information that can put you forward. Because there's a lot of folk out here that don't look like us, but they just aren't for us. And the part of the reason that Africa is in the position that she in is because there are people that look like me and everyone else that looks this color in this shape, form, and fashion sitting in the UN right now and doing the white man's work. And so until we know that, until we know knowledge of self, we cannot uplift any of these hands of the colonizers off our Black bodies where we are. And our Black bodies are not safe anywhere where we are until Mother Africa is redeemed. And we can do that in various of ways. It's not just simply going back there. We can redeem our native tongues. We can redeem our native spiritualities. We can redeem our how we handle economics and politics and cultural heritage and unity and everything that we do, we can redeem it. And that's part of redeeming Mother Africa. So for all of those that are listening, the time is now. I love the elders. I need you guys to keep mentoring us and push us despite of, but the work that needs to be done is not your job. The work that needs to be done is the youth. We all have one job, and the elders' one job is not to be doing this work. And the babies of this movement are to be nurtured at home by the village. We need to redeem our Black men and bring them home. And we need to build out what it is to be an African. And that is what I want to leave the show with. Just know what it means to be an African. Because although I am in America, I am an African. And I choose to remain as such.
Thank you. Just let me say this. The story you told about the bones that were more or less dug up. Initially, I thought you were talking about the African burial ground that is now that I think it's in Philadelphia.
It's New York. There's one in Richmond and one in New York.
Well, the one in New York, I know about that one very well because I documented it. I think there's one in Philadelphia, I think, as well. But our bodies, our blood covers every inch of this land. That, you know, we've watered this land. I mean, you know, all of its economics come from our back, you know, no matter what. But I just want to thank you for that because I wasn't
aware.
Yeah, of that.
There's an African burial ground. It was documented by Dr. Sean Utsi. He's a psychologist. He actually he's also in the same space that we're in as well. So he documents that. There's a huge documentary on it. And so that African burial ground right now, it is a historic site in Richmond, Virginia.
Wow. What happened? Okay. I'm trying to get the audio back to you. Say something. Wow.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Okay, I'm sorry. So the African burial ground, though, that's in Richmond, has been documented by Dr. Sean Utsi, and it sits literally, if you can stand on the African burial ground and you can look right up at the well where their bodies were dumped. It's like literally a walk, and it's a up a hill walk. So you just walk up the hill and you're there. It probably takes you like less than 10 minutes to get from the African burial ground to the hospital. And then what sits right next to the African burial ground is Lumpkin slave jail, where slaves were held at and auctioned off at when they came off of the James River. And so all of that sits right there, and it's called Shako Bottom. And if you remember Lupita Nyong'o, some years back, she was tweeting about a place called Shako Bottom. And she visited Shako Bottom and found out about the slave jail in the African burial ground. And she was just disheartened by it. And so I think there's, like you said, there's so much history and knowledge that we just don't know. But to know that our ancestors' bodies were brought home at the end of 2019 and laid to rest in Richmond, Virginia, and to see what's happening in Richmond, Virginia right now, it just only shows you the power of the ancestors and the creators and what it is that we need to do next. I see right now this movement of liberation and redemption. It's now. The time is now, and the youth want it now. They just haven't met me yet. And I'm not even wanting to be cocky or big-headed or anything of that nature at all, because there's a lot of great and amazing people doing work. But I know that I can connect with the youth in a way that is genuine and pure, and we can get them to do work and realize that demeaning themselves and self-hate and calling yourself animals and other names that were given to you by the oppressor is just not what's going to help you manifest the life that you want. And that part about manifesting the words that you speak out of your mouth and what you allow your eyes to see, you're going to manifest that same negative energy into everything that you do. And so the time is now, and the ancestors have come home, and we're ready to receive them and go to work. And I know that my generation and those after me are willing to work, and the elders are willing to be patient and understand it's no disrespect, but my mom didn't build the relationship between me and my grandmom very well. And that's just what happened.
I want to thank you again, and I look forward to a continued relationship and dialogue.
I look forward to the same.
All right now. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.